Have you ever poured your heart and soul into a dream, only to watch someone you love rip it apart without a second thought? That's exactly what I went through when I discovered that my own sister, the person I trusted most in the world, stole every single penny of my wedding budget. Money I'd spent years saving for the day I'd fantasized about since I was a little girl. The betrayal cut deeper than I can even describe, leaving me heartbroken, furious, and questioning whether I'd ever get to walk down the aisle. But this isn't just a story of loss and pain. It's about clawing my way back from the edge, fighting through tears and doubt, and somehow finding a way to create beauty out of absolute devastation. I'm still reeling from the shock, still trying to piece together how my life turned upside down in an instant. And I've got a story that'll make your jaw drop, bring tears to your eyes, and maybe even inspire you by the end. From the gut-wrenching moment I uncovered the truth to the unexpected twist that flipped everything I thought I knew, I'm laying it all out there. Every raw emotion, every sleepless night, and every tiny spark of hope that kept me pushing forward. You won't believe what I learned about my sister or the crazy lengths I went to in order to save my wedding day. Stick with me through this long, messy, emotional ride, because I desperately need your help to figure out what comes next in this heartbreaking journey. My name's Hannah, and I'm 27 years old, living in the picturesque town of St. Augustine, Florida, a place that feels like a postcard come to life with its cobblestone streets, historic forts, and the salty ocean breeze that always seems to carry a sense of calm. I'm a kindergarten teacher at a small elementary school just off A1A, spending my days knee-deep in glitter and glue sticks, surrounded by the infectious laughter of 5-year-olds, and my nights dreaming of a future with my fiancé, Jake, the kindest, most grounded man I've ever known. Jake's a park ranger at Anastasia State Park, and we met years ago under the sprawling live oaks during a community picnic, bonding over a shared love for nature and quiet moments. St. Augustine isn't just where I live. It's woven into the very fabric of who I am. Its pastel-colored colonial buildings, the rhythmic clatter of horse-drawn carriages through the historic district, and the way the sun paints the Matanzas River gold at sunset. It's all part of my story. This is where I grew up, where I fell in love with Jake on the steps of the St. Augustine Lighthouse during a spontaneous sunset climb, and where I've always pictured my wedding, with the Atlantic Ocean as my backdrop, fairy lights twinkling in the warm night air, and the scent of jasmine floating around me. I'd been saving for that dream wedding since I was 22, meticulously tucking away every spare dollar from my modest teacher's salary into a dedicated account, envisioning a small but perfect day with my closest family and friends, a flowing white dress with delicate lace, and Jake waiting for me at the end of a petal-strewn aisle. But last spring, just 6 months before our planned date in October, my entire world shattered when I discovered that my sister, Mia, had drained every last cent of that $8,000 budget, money I'd trusted her to help manage as part of our wedding planning. The emotional conflict that erupted inside me felt like a Category 5 hurricane tearing through my chest, a toxic mix of betrayal, white-hot rage, and a profound, aching sadness that still lingers as I sit on my tiny apartment balcony, gazing out over the historic district with the distant hum of evening traffic below. Mia is 2 years younger than me, 25 now, and we've always been close. Or at least, I thought we were. She's the free spirit of the family, always chasing the next thrill, hopping from one impulsive idea to another, while I'm the steady one, the planner who keeps everything together. When I asked her to help with wedding logistics, like researching vendors and making deposits, I saw it as a chance to bond, to share this monumental chapter of my life with the person who knew me best. I gave her access to the wedding account for convenience, thinking it would make things easier since she was handling some of the bookings. Never in a million years did I imagine she'd use that trust to betray me in the worst way possible. The day I found out, I was sitting at my worn wooden kitchen table, a mug of chamomile tea cooling beside me, checking the account balance to pay a deposit for a venue, a stunning beachfront spot just north of town near Volano Beach. My heart stopped dead when I saw the balance. 0. My hands shook as I refreshed the page over and over, praying it was some kind of glitch, some bank error I could fix with a quick call. But the transaction history told a different story. Large withdrawals, some as much as $1,000 at a time, spread over weeks, all linked to Mia's debit card. I felt physically sick, my vision blurring with hot tears as I stared at the screen, the distant cry of seagulls outside my window mocking the chaos in my head. How could she do this to me? My own sister, who'd sobbed with me from pure joy when Jake proposed under the lighthouse's sweeping beam, who'd promised to be my maid of honor and help make my day perfect. The anger burned so fiercely I thought I might scream, my fists clenching until my nails dug into my palms. But beneath that rage was a grief so heavy it felt like a boulder on my chest. I hadn't just lost money. I'd lost the trust I'd placed in the one person I believed would never, ever hurt me. Memories of Mia crashed over me like waves in the days that followed, each one a sharp, bittersweet stab as I tried to wrap my mind around her betrayal, often wandering aimlessly along St. Augustine's ancient city walls near the Castillo de San Marcos to clear my head. I couldn't stop thinking about us as kids, building lopsided sandcastles on Crescent Beach, giggling uncontrollably as the tide washed them away, pinky swearing we'd be best friends forever no matter what. I remembered the tougher times, too, when our parents' messy divorce rocked our world when I was 15 and Mia was 13, how we'd hide in her bedroom with the door locked, blasting old Taylor Swift songs on a beat-up CD player to drown out their shouting matches downstairs. I could still see her tear-streaked face as she confessed how scared she was that we'd be split up, and how I'd promised to always look out for her. I thought about how proud I felt when she graduated high school despite struggling with grades, and how I'd spent a whole weekend helping her move into her first tiny apartment near Lincolnville, painting the walls a bright teal while we laughed at our terrible DIY skills, paint splattered on our clothes and in our hair. Those memories made the pain so much worse, because they reminded me of the sister I adored, not the one who'd stolen from me without a shred of remorse. Had I missed warning signs? Was she in some kind of trouble I didn't notice? Or had she just stopped caring about me altogether? I'd lie awake in my bed night after night, the soft hum of crickets outside my window blending with the occasional distant horn from a boat on the river, wondering if our entire bond had been a lie, if I'd been too naive to see her for who she really was. Every corner of St. Augustine, the ornate towers of Flagler College, the little hole-in-the-wall cafe on Hippolyta Street where we'd grab iced lattes on lazy Saturdays, even the quiet park benches by the bayfront where we people watch, held a piece of our shared history, and now each spot felt tainted, a painful reminder of what I'd lost, not just in dollars but in family. The resentment grew like a noxious weed, wrapping around my heart and choking out any softness I had left as I grappled with the fallout, feeling more isolated than I ever had in St. Augustine's usually comforting embrace. I couldn't bring myself to tell Jake at first, consumed by shame that my own flesh and blood had done this to me, terrified he'd think less of me for letting it happen. I stopped answering Mia's texts, ignoring her calls even when they came late at night, even though a part of me screamed to confront her, to demand answers, to yell until my throat was raw. I'd walk past the wedding dress boutique on King Street, the one where I'd tried on my dream gown months earlier, a simple but elegant design with a flowing skirt and delicate embroidery, and feel this bitter, hollow pang in my chest at the thought that I might never wear it now. My savings were completely gone, and with my teacher's salary barely covering rent and bills, rebuilding that fund before the wedding felt like an impossible mountain to climb. I started avoiding places tied to Mia, like the small park off Riberia Street where we'd picnic as teenagers, sharing cheap sandwiches and dreaming about our futures, because every memory stung like a fresh wound, making me question how I could have been so blind to her true nature. I'd sit in my classroom long after the kids had gone home for the day, surrounded by colorful crayon drawings taped to the walls and tiny chairs scattered around, staring at the engagement ring on my finger, a simple silver band with a small diamond that Jake had saved months for, and feel this crushing weight that I'd let him down too. I resented Mia for stealing more than just money. She'd stolen my joy, my trust, my vision of a perfect day, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for that kind of betrayal, no matter what her reasons might have been. The unexpected twist came about a month after I discovered the theft, and it turned my understanding of Mia's actions completely upside down, leaving me more confused and conflicted than ever. I'd been avoiding her like the plague, but I couldn't avoid the truth forever. I started digging into where the money had gone, checking her social media for any clues, feeling like some kind of creepy stalker, but too desperate for answers to care. I noticed posts about a shiny new car she'd been driving around town, flashy dinners at upscale restaurants on St. George Street, and weekend trips to Jacksonville, things she absolutely couldn't afford on her part-time barista salary at a local coffee shop. My blood boiled at the thought of her living it up with my hard-earned money, but then I stumbled on something else entirely. A GoFundMe link she'd shared on her Instagram story for just a few hours before deleting it, tied to a close friend of hers named Lila, who'd apparently been in a horrific car accident and needed emergency surgery with medical bills piling up fast. My stomach churned as I read the campaign description, my mind racing as I started piecing things together. Had Mia taken my wedding money to help Lila cover her costs? I remembered Lila vaguely from high school, a quiet, shy girl Mia had always been fiercely protective of, often inviting her over when Lila's home life got rough, but I had no idea they were still in touch, let alone close enough for Mia to do something this drastic. I sat on my faded blue couch that night, the soft glow of St. Augustine's streetlights filtering through my window and casting long shadows across the room, feeling a violent storm of emotions crashing over me. Relief that maybe Mia hadn't spent the money on selfish whims, but also a fresh, searing wave of anger that she'd chosen to steal instead of coming to me for help. Why hadn't she just asked me? Why betray my trust instead of explaining the situation? This twist didn't excuse what she'd done, not by a long shot, but it muddied the waters, made me question whether her betrayal stemmed from desperation rather than malice. I felt a flicker of guilt for assuming the worst about her, for painting her as a heartless thief in my mind, but the hurt still burned bright. My dream was still in ruins, no matter what her reasons were, and I couldn't just brush that aside. That revelation shifted something deep inside me, igniting a fire to fight for my wedding in ways I hadn't thought possible, though the road ahead was anything but smooth or easy. I didn't confront Mia right away. I wasn't ready to face her, to hear excuses or apologies that might not fix the gaping hole she'd left in my life. Instead, I poured all my energy into salvaging my day, determined not to let her actions define my future. I finally told Jake everything, sitting on a weathered wooden bench by the Castillo de San Marcos one humid evening, the old fort's imposing stone walls looming behind us as I poured out my shame, my fear, and my anger, tears streaming down my face as the words tumbled out. His quiet, unwavering support, his calloused hand squeezing mine, his steady hazel eyes locked on me with nothing but love, gave me a strength I didn't know I had. We decided together to rethink the entire wedding, to strip it down to what truly mattered. The two of us, our commitment, and the life we wanted to build. I started scouring every corner of the internet for deals, reaching out to local vendors in St. Augustine who might offer discounts to a teacher on a tight budget. I found a small, lesser-known beach venue near Villano willing to slash their rates for a weekday event, cutting the cost by nearly half. A friend from my book club who baked cakes as a hobby offered to make ours for free as a wedding gift, and another colleague connected me with a photographer who was just starting out and willing to work for exposure rather than a full fee. I spent countless late nights crafting decorations myself, cutting intricate paper flowers from cheap cardstock, stringing fairy lights I'd bought on clearance, and painting mason jars to use as centerpieces, my fingers aching and my eyes burning from lack of sleep, but my heart slowly mending with each small victory. I took on extra tutoring gigs after school, teaching math to middle schoolers and reading to struggling first graders, saving every penny I earned, while Jake picked up overtime shifts at the park, patrolling trails on weekends to help rebuild our fund. It was exhausting, soul-draining work, and I'd collapse into bed some nights, the faint scent of ocean air drifting through my cracked window, wondering if it was worth all this struggle, if I'd ever feel the magic I'd once envisioned for my wedding day, or if it would always feel like a compromise. The process of rebuilding forced me to confront parts of myself I'd long ignored, as I navigated this heartbreak in a town that felt both like a warm embrace and a cruel mirror of my pain with its constant reminders of happier times. I'd walk along the Bridge of Lions at sunrise, the water shimmering below like liquid glass, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange, and think about my own flaws, how I'd trusted too easily, how I'd put Mia on a pedestal without really seeing the cracks in her life. I wondered if I'd been a good enough sister to her, if I'd missed cries for help because I was too wrapped up in my own world of lesson plans and wedding Pinterest boards. I thought about our parents' divorce again, how it hit Mia harder than it hit me, how she'd acted out with rebellion while I buried myself in schoolwork and extracurriculars to cope. Had I failed her back then? And was this somehow a consequence of that distance? I'd sit in local cafes like the Kookaburra on Aviles Street, sipping bitter black coffee amid the chatter of tourists snapping photos of the oldest street in America, sketching wedding ideas in a worn notebook, trying to process the tangled mess of anger, the longing for the sister I missed so desperately, and the stubborn hope that I could still have my day despite everything. I'd wander through the St. Augustine flea market on weekends, hunting for cheap decor items, and find myself lost in thought, remembering how Mia and I used to come here as teens, haggling over vintage trinkets and splitting a funnel cake, sticky sugar on our fingers as we laughed. St. Augustine's timeless beauty, the golden light reflecting off the bayfront, the whisper of history in every weathered brick and ancient oak, mirrored my inner turmoil, a backdrop of resilience that urged me to keep going even on the days I wanted to throw in the towel and call the whole wedding off. Months passed, and as the wedding date crept closer, I'd built something new from the ashes of my original plan, though it wasn't the grand, picture-perfect vision I'd started with all those years ago. The venue was set, a quiet, intimate stretch of beach near Villano, with just 30 guests instead of the 100 I'd once imagined, but it felt right, more personal somehow. My dress was secondhand, found at a dusty thrift shop on San Marco Avenue after weeks of searching, but when I slipped it on in the cramped dressing room, the soft lace hugging my frame, I felt beautiful, like it had been waiting for me all along. Jake and I wrote our own vows together, sitting on his creaky porch overlooking the marshlands near his cabin, the air thick with the scent of salt and pine, laughing and crying as we poured our hearts onto crumpled notebook paper, promising to weather any storm side by side. I'd walk through St. Augustine's winding streets in the evenings, past the old Spanish architecture of the colonial quarter and the vibrant blooms of bougainvillea spilling over garden walls, feeling a cautious pride that I'd done this, that I hadn't let Mia's betrayal stop me from creating something meaningful. But the ache in my chest remained. I hadn't spoken to her since discovering the theft, hadn't invited her to the wedding, though I'd stare at old photos of us on my phone late at night, torn between a longing to hear her voice and a resentment that still simmered under my skin. I drive past her apartment sometimes, a rundown complex near the edge of town by the San Sebastian River, and feel this magnetic pull to stop, to knock on her door, to ask about Lila, and see if there was anything left of us to salvage. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Not when the wound was still so raw. Not when I wasn't sure if I'd be met with regret or defensiveness. I also started reflecting more deeply on the little things, the mundane moments with Mia that I'd taken for granted, as I tried to understand how we'd gotten to this breaking point. I remembered the way she'd always sneak extra whipped cream onto my hot chocolate when we'd stop at a diner after school, grinning like she'd pulled off some grand heist. I thought about the time she'd stayed up all night with me before a big college exam, quizzing me on history dates while we ate cold pizza, even though she had work at 6 a.m. I recalled how, after my first serious breakup at 19, she'd drag me to the beach at midnight, insisting we scream our frustrations into the ocean, the waves swallowing our voices as we collapsed into the sand, laughing through tears. Those small acts of love clashed so violently with what she'd done now, and I couldn't reconcile the two versions of her in my mind. I'd sit on the steps of the Leitner Museum sometimes, watching couples and families stroll by,